My heartfelt thanks for our hosts for the privilege to be here. And I should say I was delighted to hear the Egyptian, Israeli, Greek, Cypriot and German perspectives. But I also think that any conference topic containing the words Eastern Mediterranean and challenges would be incomplete without a speaker giving the troublemakers perspective. So I'm going to be that somebody. I'll start with what I call Russian gambit. When in the late 50s, Kemal Nejatkovar was serving as a Turkish ambassador in Moscow, Andrei Gromyko, the then Soviet Commissar for Foreign Affairs, asked him, "Your Excellency, I see that your country keeps the largest number of men under arms in Europe. If it is against your traditional enemies, the Greeks, it is too big. If it is against us, it is too small." And I guess little, if any, has changed since then, as evinced by the events, especially by November 24th and January 29th. As a matter of fact, these events, like others in Turkey's recent political history, in Eastern Mediterranean and elsewhere in the former Ottoman lands, forcefully reminded us of a cable sent by a former US ambassador to Ankara, sent to Washington. In that cable, the ambassador described Turkish Islamists' foreign policy calculus in one single line. He portrayed Turkey as a country with Rolls-Royce ambitions and rover resources. On November 24th, Turkey became the first NATO member state to shoot down a Soviet or Russian military aircraft in post-World War II history. The Russian Su-24 was shot down for briefly violating Turkish airspace along with Turkey's Syrian border. The violation lasted only 17 seconds. At the time of the conflict, I likened the whole incident to a chessboard on which the Russians were clearly playing a game of chess, while the Turks were throwing dice after dice and trying to play a game of backgammon. The incident also revealed how disconnected with reality Turkish policy making was. In 2012, then Prime Minister Erdogan said, "We have consensus with Russia over Syria." In another speech, he said, "Russia is positive about a transition government without Assad." In December 14, now President Erdogan, he said, "Generally speaking, we have consensus with Russia for a solution in Syria." And in July 2015, he said, "Russia's attitude over Syria is much more positive than before." In another speech, he said that he believes Russia now would be willing to give up on Assad. And barely 2 weeks before the Su-24 incident on November 11, Turkish Deputy Prime Minister Numan Kurtulmuş said, "I can see that Russia is coming closer to a Syria without Assad." And only 1 week before the shooting down of the Russian aircraft, Turkey's top diplomat and then interim foreign minister, Feridun Sinirlioğlu, said, "I cannot say that the Russians have agreed to Assad's departure, but they do not resist to that either." So much wishful thinking in Ankara. Once again, the Turks misread what was on the chessboard. Well, clearly Moscow sacrificed one aircraft and found a golden opportunity and a perfect pretext to reinforce its military deployments in the area, including installations of S-400 long-range air and anti-missile defense systems, which since then have completely halted Turkish flights on Syrian skies. Not to mention the fact that if there was one happiest man on earth in the morning of November 24th, it must be Assad himself. Keeping up the chess game, Putin wanted to further humiliate Ankara. on January 29th, another Russian aircraft, this time an Su-34, violated Turkish airspace and flight back to its base unscratched. In fact, that incident, the second violation, sparked a kind of self-ridiculing Turkish answer. On November 24th, according to the official Turkish narrative, a Russian aircraft had violated Turkish airspace, so it had to be shot down. On January 29th, according to the same official Turkish narrative, the Turkish airspace had suddenly become NATO's airspace. So Turkish Prime Minister Davutoğlu quickly referred the whole violation case to NATO. In short, the Russians gave up on one aircraft and won a country. And the Turks, on the other hand, quite ironically, they wanted a no-fly zone in Syria, and now they've got one, a de facto Russian-imposed no-fly zone. The Turkish learning experience in terms of policymaking is not always based on the idea of learning by suffering or practicing. At the center of Turkey's regional policy, when I say regional, for the Turkish mindset, the region is the former Ottoman lands, not just Eastern Mediterranean or the Middle East. So this policy is about an Islamist desire to revive the Ottoman grandeur and illusions of a Sunni-dominated region subservient to an emerging Turkish empire. That is the basic idea. Davutoğlu and Erdogan miscalculated before the outbreak of the Arab Spring that systematic Israel bashing would bring under an umbrella several Israel-hating Arab states in the Middle East, forever grateful to Turkey and its leaders, and queuing up to become unofficial colonies of the Turkish Empire. Therefore, the Turkish Islamic banner would be hoisted on all corners of the region, from the Maghreb to Syria, Egypt, Lebanon, and the Gulf, and Muslims would live happily ever after. That goal was basically too naive, sometimes too childishly naive, too ambitious, and would probably make one smile again, recalling the US ambassador's portrayal of Turkish policy, Rolls-Royce and Rover. But Davutoğlu, so far as we Turkey watchers observe, gives no indication that he may think about revising his policy goals, although he may be forced soon to recalibrate his policy instruments, such as potential normalization of diplomatic relations with Israel, and albeit a more distant one, with Egypt. In a speech in Athens in December 2014, Davutoğlu said that no arrangement could be made in the Eastern Mediterranean without Turkey and its consent. In fact, when Davutoğlu burst on the scene in 2009 with his self-tailored zero problems with neighbors policy, my own portrayal of his doctrine was zero problems, 1,000 troubles. I guess time has proven him wrong. Today, Turkey is the only country in this part of the world without full or any diplomatic relations with Cyprus, Israel, Syria, Egypt, and Libya, not to mention its sectarian proxy wars with the Shia and Shia-dominated governments in Tehran and Baghdad. But Davutoğlu is the same Davutoğlu. He is the modern-day Islamist reincarnation of the Roman historian and senator Tacitus, whose famous dictum was, "The desire for safety stands against every great and noble enterprise." So in Davutoğlu's case, the great and noble enterprise is clearly a pan-Turkist Islamism, which the Arabs and Turks called the Dawa. There's always the military perspective attached to policy objectives of Turkey's Islamists. So starting from mid-2000s, the neo-Ottoman ambitions in Ankara created a military thinking based on the idea of developing and manufacturing indigenous weapons systems. So that thinking produced a number of mostly unrealistic and presumably 100% Turkish arms development programs, including unmanned aerial vehicles, armored vehicles, helicopters, trainer aircraft, short and medium range air and anti-missile defense systems. Believe it or not, a fighter aircraft, a dual-purpose regional jet, several different types of naval and amphibious platforms, satellites, a new generation main battle tank, and most interestingly, an offensive missile system with a range of 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers. No one actually knows why a NATO ally, not a rogue state, would need such long-range offensive missile capabilities, or which potential capitals within range would be targeted. In its policy briefing paper titled The Turkish Naval Strategy, the Turkish Navy observed the following. At the heart of the disputes over sovereign naval zones in Eastern Mediterranean lies Cyprus's efforts to secure treaties with other Mediterranean countries for hydrocarbon development. Turkey remains committed to never to allow illegal hydrocarbon exploration activity around Cyprus and to taking every possible measure against any such effort. And in response to a multitude of threats, the Turkish Navy has been carrying out the Mediterranean Shield exercises in the Eastern Mediterranean since 2006. The objective of this effort is to maintain the situational awareness, to help protect our national interests, and to deter illegal activity. This policy white paper specifies the Navy's foreign policy doctrine as Turkey's foreign policy priorities highlight the Navy as an indispensable foreign policy instrument. So, therefore, the Navy concludes that the procurement of weapons systems for the Navy should be in line with these foreign policy objectives. This is the official and de facto justification of naval programs like the controversial landing platform dock. A landing platform dock, which yesterday referred to as an aircraft carrier, is a little bit more modest than an aircraft carrier, but it is an amphibious assault vessel. Turkey signed an over $1 billion contract with the Turkish and the Spanish shipyard for this contract. Navantia is the Spanish shipyard's name. So this planned ship will be in service, according to the Turkish Navy's plans, by 2021. It will carry a battalion-sized unit of 1,200 troops and personnel, 8 utility helicopters on the deck, 3 unmanned aerial vehicles, and it can transport up to 150 vehicles, including battle tanks. It will also have an aircraft platform for vertical takeoff and landing. A ski jump at the front of the deck can be used to launch fighter aircraft. These are the main features. So Turkish military officials say that the LPD, the landing platform dock, will deploy on the Aegean, the Black Sea, and the Mediterranean, as well as on Turkish Navy's operations on the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. This is their reasoning. Thus, Turkey will be the third operator in the world of this kind of ship after Spain and Australia. But a more realistic question for this $1 billion naval toy should be, where really will the Turkish Navy land troops, tanks, helicopters, and 1,200 troops all at the same time? Cyprus again, Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, China, Chile. No one could seriously think of a politically and militarily realistic future for any Turkish LPD operation of this size. So, once again, I cannot help but recall Gromyko's remark. If the Turks are dreaming of regaining the Ottoman dominance over the Mediterranean just by spending $1 billion on a fancy vessel, it would be a too small effort. Well, that is precisely because of the military balances in the Mediterranean. Whereas on the other hand, if they are planning another invasion of Cyprus, it is not realistic, and the vessel they are building will be too big for that. I guess at the heart of the matter from a Turkish point of view is that in this part of the world, what we observe is the existence of too many conflicting interests. In Syria and Iraq, for instance, ISIS is the outcome rather than the root cause of the problem. Muslim states and their neighbors in the Eastern Mediterranean will possibly keep floating on a sea of chaos as long as there will be power vacuum in the Levant. And that will always threaten stability in Eastern Mediterranean. For a better region, there must be functional administration, at least on this we all agree, functional administrations in both Syria and Iraq. The players, I guess this is also the heart of the matter. The players, including Turkey, are running after a bigger slice of a smaller cake. Turkey's sectarian ambitions are no secret, nor are Iran's. And today there are nearly 50,000 Shia militia fighting at the Syrian theater, where a majority of the population is Sunni. And remember, this is a 14th century long fighting within Islam. Russia, on the other hand, has been bombing targets hostile to Assad's regime since September 30th. We're talking about, when we say Russia and its operations, we're talking about over 7,500 sorties so far, 89% of which hits opponents to the Assad regime, and only 11% targeting Ayad. Russia has also piled up a very serious military inventory around the Eastern Mediterranean and the Caspian Sea. In short, Russia's fighting is not about defeating ISIS, but about expanding its area of influence in the Eastern Mediterranean, including the mouth of the Suez Canal. In a way, Turkey is challenging NATO through Syria, same as Turkey is challenging the Shia through Syria, or Iran challenging the Sunni through Syria. I guess I will stop by asking 6 questions, which I think will be critical in understanding whether we will have a stable future in this part of the world. So, 1, will the Muslims ever stop hating and killing each other, including bombing their mosques along sectarian lines, and end their 14th century long war? My second question is, will the Sunni world ever mature and stop its own radicalization without peace being imposed upon them from the non-Muslim world? And 3, will the Shia world ever mature and control its own sectarian expansionist ambitions? 4, will the Sunni and Shia worlds ever mature and stop hating Jews and committing to annihilate the state of Israel? 5, will Turkey's Islamists ever realize that their neo-Ottoman ambitions are too disproportionate with their power and regional clout? And final question, will the players in the Eastern Mediterranean ever be able to be happy with a bigger cake and their slices not necessarily getting smaller? Well, sadly, my own answers to those questions are negative. Thank you.